Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples every day so I can earn money to provide you folks a free education. So Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com is my pride and joy. We're having our first class in a long time, in-person class in Durham, North Carolina next week. We're going to be learning how to build simple AI systems using Python, Olama, SQLite, and a few other things. That class is actually completely full. It is oversubscribed, as they say. New and different ways for Eli the computer guy to fuck the hell up. I did not cut off the RSVPs on that damn thing in time. Anyways, that class is over full, but we are going to be doing these classes in Durham, North Carolina, 1 to 2 times per month. I'll be going up there 1 to 2 days per time. So if you're interested in hands-on, free to the end user tech education, take a look at silicondojo.com. So anyways, have you ever had one of those days where you want to be excited, you want to be hopeful, you want to think things will get better, and then you remember it's 2025. It's 2025. Things might have been able to get better in 2024. Hell, things might have been able to get better in 2018. But it's 2025. If you're hopeful in 2025, you're just dumb at this point. You're just dumb. So anyways, I think this is an interesting story with Intel, right? So I've been talking about Intel lately. As Gamers Nexus says, they're not saying that Intel is in a death spiral, but if you look at a death spiral, and if you look at what Intel is doing, they look very similar. Anyways, Intel has been doing its thing for however many years now, right? I remember when Intel was the Intel. You know, Yahoo was Yahoo, and Research in Motion was Research in Motion, and Intel was Intel. Look, for the past decade, I don't even know what the hell these boys and girls have been doing over there. It literally doesn't fucking make sense. Even when they come out with things that I'm excited about, even when they come out with things like I really am like, yay! They still fuck it up. Like, was it RealSense? Was it called RealSense? They had this vision system, right? They had this three-dimensional AI vision system that they were promoting for years. And then they sold it. And then they sold it. They had the NUCs, or the nukes, however you call them. They're called Next Unit Computes. Basically, they're incredibly small. They're small, little, full-fledged computers, like real i7s, real i9s, real RAM, NVMe drives, the whole 9 yards. Fucking awesome. And then they sold that division to like ASUS. Right, so everything that they're doing is cool. They sell for some reason. And then other things they fail at, right? They're 5G. They were working on 5G for years. Apparently they screwed that one up so bad that they sold that to Apple, as far as I understand. And so now you just have Intel selling the same i7, i9 crap, you know, in an ARM world. So Intel is, I don't know, doing what the hell Intel is doing. Like, I don't get it. I just don't understand. Anyways, the curious thing though is we are in 2025, and so the Trump administration decided the U.S. government should buy a 10% equity stake in Intel. So this is not a grant, this is not a loan. They bought 10% of Intel's equity, so 10% of the shares that are available for Intel, they purchased so that the U.S. government could be an owner in Intel. And the thing to understand here, like, it wasn't like there were new contracts coming out. It's not like, oh, Intel is now producing this amazing new chip for our new ICBMs or Hellfire missiles or drones or whatever else. It's just like, hey, we are going to show how confident the American government is in Intel by spending taxpayer money to buy equity in Intel. And again, it's the Trump administration. So you're like, oh, golly. Golly. And so it was interesting, right? After they bought 10% share in Intel, then SoftBank comes in. And you know what happens when SoftBank shows up to the party. Everything gets fucked up. Anyway, SoftBank comes in and they invest $2 billion. Isn't that interesting? Wow, SoftBank now sees the value in Intel. Curious. And then you have NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA comes out, they drop $5 billion. I think they're buying $5 billion in equity in Intel because They see the value in Intel. As the world's most valuable company, they see the innovation and excitement coming out of Intel. Did I say that right, Mr. Trump? Mr. Trump, can I now start selling crap to China again, please? Anyway, so NVIDIA comes in and they buy a $5 billion stake, which, again, it's one of those interesting things where, you know, what does it actually mean? Right, you got a $5 trillion company, so them throwing $5 billion on the table isn't me like throwing $50 on the table. Like, does it really matter? Is that really an investment? Or is that showing you support the government's initiative? Right. So what I think is interesting now is apparently AMD is getting into the ass-kissing business. Like, how far is this gonna go? How far is this gonna go? Intel in early talks to add AMD as a foundry customer. So basically, Intel was splitting up. I'm so fucking confused. Oh fuck. What was Intel doing? Anyways, they've been through a few CEOs and they've had a few plans. The only thing they've been really successful at is laying off 40,000 people. But other than that, they've had these plans. They did this interesting plan with, so Intel, basically what Intel did before is they designed their chips, and then they were the fab for their own chips, right? So they produce the chips, or they design the chips, and they produce the chips. The curious thing with TSMC, which was innovative for the time, is that they are only a fab. They don't design shit. Right? Basically, you hand them the schematics, they hand you back a metric crap ton of chips, and everybody's happy. One of the interesting things with this, with a TSMC, which is actually a very good competitive advantage, is that they are not competing with their own fucking customers. Like, one of the big problems we have right now with the syphilis that has infected Silicon Valley and the big tech world is that so many of these big tech companies literally end up competing with their own customers or vendors, right? We've seen this a lot with Amazon. So Amazon, you know, has all of these metrics for what products sell and don't sell, and they have an idea what the profit margin is and that type of thing. And so basically, like what Amazon literally does is they see the top selling products with the largest profit margins, and then they go, oh, we should create a generic version of that. And then they come out with a new version. They come out with basically a generic version of this top selling product and then try to put the original vendor out of business. Like, it's so fucked up. It should be an Onion article, but it's not. Like, and this is how these people think. Like, competing with your own customers, competing with your own vendors. They're like, yeah, of course. Anyway, so one of the good things with TSMC is that they don't. They just fab. They will fab all night long, but they're not going to do the design or any of the other stuff. So what's interesting though, so Intel's looking at it, and they've just been screwing the pooch for well over a decade. Again, I don't even understand what's going on with these people. Like, it is so fucking bad, right? Anyways, and so they had the idea a couple of years ago. Is, hey, what if we spun out our foundry division, right? So basically the idea is, hey, what if we basically had this company, and one side was the design for the Intel chips, and then the other side was fab, and basically anybody could bid on the fab, right? So you could produce NVIDIA chips, and you could produce AMD chips, and you could produce all of these other things. Anyways, one of the curious things is they asked that up somehow. They seem to have asked it up really bad. And it's so complicated, it's confusing. Like, there was supposed to be like a fab in Poland, God knows what's going on with that. There's supposed to be one in Ohio, they got like halfway built. So they did start building it, but they didn't finish building it. And then there's this whole thing that came out where they had no customers. So their latest, they talk about like the nanometer architectures or whatever. Anyways, the latest architecture or whatever that they're coming out with, in order to be able to do fabs, they said that they had like no customers, no customers at all purchasing any of this for deliverables, and it's been like this just wackadoodle thing. Like nothing that you hear out of Intel makes you feel comfortable as a technology professional, right? If you're a money person, you really fucking like the mafioso in chief of the United States of America is using taxpayer money to prop up the equity value of Intel. If you're actually a technology professional, though, you're like, But seriously, what the hell is going on here? So it's just been a mess. So one of the things that's come up is this idea of what if Intel has one division that designs and essentially one division that's the fab. But they've been going out and they've been trying to sell their fab service and nobody's giving a fuck. It's just not been that successful. I think one, TSMC is incredibly good at what they do. Two, TSMC is not a competitor, so they don't have to worry about that. And then three, you know, Intel's Intel. Like, come on, it's 2025. Would you trust Intel? If you were the CTO, or I guess the CEO for this, if you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company and you are pushing out a product for next year, would you feel comfortable putting your eggs in the basket of Intel? Probably not. And so that's why it's interesting here to see this, where now AMD out of nowhere is now like, oh, maybe we'll use your foundry as a customer. And you're like, huh. So it doesn't seem like the fundamental economics of the Intel foundry business have changed. It doesn't appear that like the technology, right? They've revolutionized the technology of doing this foundry thing. Maybe they figured out a different way to do things. It doesn't seem like that's changed. It doesn't seem like the questions of about intellectual property. And again, one of the things you have to understand in the technology world, it's not just intellectual property, right? There's patents and that type of thing that secures intellectual property. But it's also kind of like that know-how thing, is that people, like the biggest problem that we have in the technology world is we don't understand until we understand. Right? Like we will sit there for months or years trying to figure out the answer to a problem. And then once you figure out the answer to the problem, or you figure out the way to look at the problem and come up with a solution, then it takes a fraction of a second. It's like now, once we figured out what we were looking for, once we figured out X, Y, and Z, everything else became easy. So one of the issues, like with AMD or any company going to Intel for their fab, is basically the whole question is, are they going to leak, not intellectual property, that's relatively secure, but kind of like that methodology, that thought process, that looking in a particular direction and having Intel realize, oh, that's the direction that we need to go in. See, none of that has changed. All of that is exactly the same as it was 2 months ago. What is the only thing that has changed? Our mafioso in chief has invested $10 billion into Intel. And so that's where, you know, looking at it as an American, as a technology professional, I'm concerned about the next 5 years of our industry in the United States, especially as China takes off. China seems to be doing technology properly, right? They're training students in STEM. They're creating production hubs. They're creating entire supply chains. They're doing the actual work, right? We're fucking around with financial valuations and stock prices, and they're actually building, which, you know, as I've said before, right? If you take for granted what we're told, right? As an American, if you take for granted what we're told by the establishment is that China is somewhere between 2 to 3 years behind us. Not 2 to 3 decades behind us, 2 to 3 years behind us. And that comes from the authority figures. And so the question is as our technology, hard technology companies keep fucking around like they've been doing for a while, how quickly does that lead evaporate? As China accelerates and as we just financialize everything, again, where does that leave us in 2030? And I'm just doing the math here, right? This is just bad math. Anyways, the scoop. Intel is in early stage talks to add AMD as a customer at Intel's factories in what would be another vote of confidence in the struggling chip maker, according to people familiar with the matter. And think about that. Why is it a vote of confidence? We're not hearing about amazing new technology. We're not hearing about amazing new stuff. We're not hearing about amazing practical things that will deliver superior technological outcomes. what we're hearing is a vote in confidence because the mafioso in chief now has an equity share in this company, and you want to make the mafioso happy, right? It seems like you got a nice supply chain there. It would be a shame if something might happen to that supply chain, right? That does not lead to technological excellence, right? In the past 7 weeks, Intel has gained investment dollars and public support from the White House, NVIDIA, and SoftBank, and is in talks for backing from Apple. So remember, Intel literally went to Apple. This is how fucking ballsy these motherfuckers are with their new friend, right? They go to Apple and is like, hey, you know who I'm hanging out with now? Hey. You know who my new friend is now, Apple? Yeah, you know who my new friend is. Do you know what my new friend does for his day job, Apple? I'm just saying, I have a bridge to nowhere to sell you. I know you can buy this bridge and it's not really gonna matter to your checking account. So would you like to buy this bridge? And this is where, again, we are so... Elon, you got Trump derangement syndrome. Yes. Yes. Trump is making me deranged. Seeing the abject destruction of my country under one senile piece of shit in a way that is not supposed to happen. This is not how our systems are designed to work. Yes. Anyways, Semaphore and others have reported AMD designs chips and that are currently produced mostly by Taiwan's TSMC, and Intel currently lacks the technology to produce AMD's most advanced profitable chips. And again, think about that. So Intel doesn't have the capability to even produce AMD's flagship chips. This also is curious, again, with the mafioso in chief, right? You had Lutnick come out. Lutnick literally went to Taiwan and said, hey, Taiwan, we think you should produce 50% of your chips in the United States. The United States would be more likely to send its men and women to die in a war with China if you move more of your industrial capacity to the United States. Right? And again, so you gotta be thinking about this all as a whole. Taiwan just told us to pound sand, because Taiwan's not as stupid as some folks in this world. So again, it's kind of this interesting thing here of looking what AMD is doing, and is this good for the business? Is this good, or is this good, again, for optics? It's unclear how much of AMD's manufacturing would shift to Intel if the two companies reach a deal, or whether it would come with a direct investment by AMD, similar to deals cut by the other companies. Wouldn't that be interesting if AMD starts investing in Intel? AMD has reason to stay, again, think about this. AMD has reason to stay in the White House's good graces. Again, this has more to do with the White House than anything else. Its significant business selling chips in China was hit by export restrictions earlier this year, which Trump recently loosened. Intel's chip factories are considered inferior to TSMC's, but big American companies following the Trump administration's preference for having a U.S. chip manufacturing champion have diverted at least some of their production, mostly for less advanced chips, toward Intel's domestic foundries. So isn't that good to hear? Hey, Intel is doing good again. Don't you understand their stock price is up by like 77% this year? Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, their value is going up because they're building substandard piece of shit hardware just so other tech companies can try to pander to the mafioso in chief. Doesn't that make you excited about the future of U.S. technology? So yeah, we'll see how this crap show goes. The thing that I find really fascinating about all this, I read, again, all these articles, whether it's, Taiwan and doing 50% of their production here, NVIDIA, South, all these with Intel. And the most fascinating thing I see with this is what is left out of the conversation. What is Intel's actual differentiator? The only differentiator that comes up in any of these conversations is that the Trump administration invested in them. We don't hear about better technology. We don't hear about a more secure or stable supply chain. Again, that's the interesting thing. Like, when we start thinking about things like manufacturing, understand the fab or the factory isn't the only thing that's important to actually poop out a product at the end, right? You need all of the supplies coming in. And so what's very curious about a lot of this is we're not actually hearing that Intel creates a more secure or stable supply chain. It is that the chips will be manufactured here. But here's the thing, if the rare earths can't get into the United States, then the fabs can't produce any chips. Therefore, we're not really any less vulnerable than we were the day before, right? If other components or whatever can't come into the United States, again, the fab can't put out components, so we're not any better off than the day before. And that's what's so curious with this whole thing with Intel is you hear about people kissing the ring and all that kind of stuff, but you're not. Oh yes, their new fab, their new factory, their new process, their new methodology, their new contracts, right? One of the big things I talk about in the technology world is if you really want to be successful in technology in the 2020s and 2030s, go get your Juris Doctor. I honestly believe a law degree is going to be more important in the technology world than whatever certification or comp sci degree. But what's curious here, right? And you're not hearing that. You're not hearing how Intel came up with an innovative new contract to make people feel more comfortable, sharing information and not having that leak out or whatever else. You are not hearing how Intel is actually improving in any way, shape, or form. And that's what just sends me up the wall. So anyways, what do you think about this? What do you think about AMD being in early talks to use Intel's fabs? What do you think about Intel right now? Are you hearing about Intel now going, wow, that's exciting, right? When you first heard about a NUC or whatever they're called, when the first time you heard about Real Vision, the first time you heard about an Edison or whatever else, Jarvis or whatnot, like you remember when you were excited about what Intel was doing. How does that compare to now? Anyways, put your thoughts down below. Give us a thumbs up, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing, call me a moron. Just be a real Lutnick and do it down there in the comment section. Do remember my pride and joy is Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com. We have in-person hands-on classes. We have our first one coming up in Durham, North Carolina next week. That is full, but if you're interested in the other classes, that will be coming up. Make sure to become a member of Silicon Dojo. And with that, see y'all later.